All right, so let's go ahead and get ourselves started. This last section I'm going to split into two different segments. One of which we're going to just talk about basic background properties. These are background properties that should work in pretty much any browser. So they're going to just be a good, solid foundation on which you should build. The next segment is going to talk about CSS3 background properties. Those are properties that may not work in older browsers without a great deal of intervention. So if you're going to use them, you have to be certain to have a fallback for IE7, IE8, and in some cases even IE9. So just be aware of that as we're going forward. All right, so let's take a look at our sort of CSS2 background image properties and just background properties as a whole. There are 5 different properties that we're going to go over real quickly. The first one is just background color. Background color is pretty self-explanatory. What I'm going to do is I'm going to come here to our CSS and I'm going to assign a background color to the entire page. Generally, if we're going to assign a background color or a background graphic to the entire page, we're going to put that on the body tag. Some people will put it on the HTML tag, and I suspect that there are tons of essays and blog posts written about which one is better and all of that. Generally speaking, I stick with the body tag. Okay, so I'm going to assign it a background color. Background color, the property is background-color. Pretty self-explanatory. And just for now, to give it kind of a color that's easy for us to keep up with, I'm going to B0C3D4. And this should give us kind of a nice sort of periwinkle-ish sort of light blue color. So let's do that. When we refresh it, as you can see, it gives us that color. Now, you might remember that these elements right here are all in their own div. So what about if we wanted those to continue being on a white background? Really easy. Let's go back here because it's both the content and the footer. And once again, background color. We're going to use the shorthand for white, which is FFF as opposed to 6 Fs. And what that should do is exactly this. It gives us a little bit more of a contrast. All right, as you can see, by doing that, we can now see that all of the elements are flush against the inside of those divs. So what would we do in order to buy ourselves a little bit more space? Well, what we might do is apply some padding, and I'm going to do just that, give 15 pixels of padding. Remember, when we only have a single value, that's going to give us that same amount of padding on all 4 sides of our design. So when I refresh, you can now see that I've got 15 pixels of padding on the top, right, left, and bottom. Excellent. Okay. So we've done another quick little thing there. We've talked about the background. Now what about if we wanted a background image? And we've got a couple different options if you look in the demo folder for background images. We're going to start off with what happens if we just want sort of a standard tiling image. So what we would do here is we would have background image, and the syntax is background image, and it's followed by URL and then the path, the relative path or the absolute path. Now the difference between those two is this. An absolute path is going to include the HTTP, the www, and it's going to be how would I find that file if I just wanted to copy and paste a URL into my browser and find just that image file. A relative path starts from the location of the CSS file and browses to the location within the website of that file. So in this case, we're in the CSS folder, the styles folder. We want to come out of that to the root folder, so that's why we've got the .. That indicates go out to a 1 level above the CSS folder, which in this case is indeed the root folder. We're then going to look at going into the images folder, and within the images folder we're going to look at this particular image. So what we've done is we've got a background color and we've got a background image. So you'll remember we've got our background color, you can see it right there, And when I refresh the page, we've now got the background image, which, as you can see, is a lovely gradient. As we scroll down the page, though, you can see there's a problem, which is that when we reach the bottom of this gradient, it repeats itself, which isn't really all that great. That's not necessarily what we're looking for. So we've got a couple different ways of solving this problem. One is we might choose to only have the picture repeat once going across. That allows us to have this graphic provide us with our gradient going across the top of our page. So what do we do when we get to the bottom? Well, what we would generally do when we get to the bottom is figure out what color this is and have it just blend so that the rest of the page works with that. The easiest way of doing that is to go into a program like Photoshop. And I'm going to show this to you really quickly, and this will not be the last time we do this, because with the final project you're actually going to need to be well versed enough with going into graphic software, opening up files that you've been given, and figuring out what colors you're working with. You can probably guess that this is white that we're working with. But in Photoshop, what you do is you choose the eyedropper tool. You can do it by clicking on this little icon that looks like an eyedropper on the toolbar, or you can press the letter I on your keyboard. And we're just gonna click down here on the very, very bottom. That's going to change this color here, and we can click on it one time and we can see that indeed that was white. So I'm going to come back here to my code, and I'm going to change my background color to white, and I'm going to leave the background image as it is. But now I want to tell the background image that I don't want it tiling all the way across the page. That's generally what background images do, is they repeat over and over and over again to fill the viewport of whatever device you're viewing on. So what we're going to do is we're going to use this property, background repeat. And with background repeat, you can choose repeat, which is the default setting. That's what we've already got, where it repeats over and over and over again and fills the screen. You can also choose no repeat, which would only allow the image to show up one time. So if we said no repeat, let's take a look at what that gives us. Well, that's cool because it blends into that, but what it gives us is this one little stripe, which doesn't really work either. So what we want to look at instead is some of these other repeat options we've got, and they are repeat X and repeat Y. So let's see first of all what repeat Y gives us. So we've refreshed. It doesn't look like we're getting what we want, but we can see what's happened. Repeat Y repeats along the Y axis. That means, in other words, top to bottom. So let's say that you had a little side graphic that you want to repeat, it holes for a notebook or something like that. That would be a really good use for repeat Y. However, this is not working for what we want. Let's go in and try the other repeat that we've got available, which is repeat X. And repeat X gives us what we're looking for. As you can see, it repeats across the x-axis, which is left to right. And when we scroll down, we can also see that the gradient fades naturally into a white background. Background images cover whatever area you give them, and whatever area they don't cover, the background color shows through. So you want to make certain that you're addressing both parts of that. All right, so we have now dealt with 3 different background things that we want to look at. Another one that we might want to look at is your background position. And the background position is actually something we're going to do a little farther down here with these downloads. You can see with these downloads that each of these is some kind of document. And when we take a look at the HTML under downloads, what we see is that it's a definition list, and that some of these items have a class of PDF and some of them have a class of Word. And if you look in your folder, you'll notice that the items, that there's a PDF image and there's a Word image. So what we're going to do is we're going to use the background imaging and the positioning properties as well as padding in order to have the proper icon next to the item. So we're going to say that all items with a class of PDF, we are going to give them a padding on the left, and what that's going to do is that's going to free up some background space for us. So we're going to have to go into our folders and figure out what that needs to be. And if we just sort of look in our chapter 8, look in here, We can see the PDF icon, and we can see that it is 24 by 24, and the Word icon is also 24 by 24. So just to give ourselves a little bit more room than that, we're going to give ourselves padding of 30 pixels, and that's going to be on the left. So what that's going to do is it's going to take the text that's on the left and it's going to push it over 30 pixels, but it's also going to increase the width of the container that holds the text by 30 pixels. And remember that background images typically fill the padding space. So the next step will be to have a background image, and that background image, we're going to use the URL again. And remember, we want to back out of our CSS folder, so that's the /images/pdf_icon.png. And we want to position it. Now there are lots of ways of positioning the image, and we're going to get into some of these in a little bit more detail in our next class. But ultimately, background position can be given using percentages, numerical values using pixels and ems and such, and also by using keywords. We're just going to use keywords in this case because they're going to be sufficient for our need. The keywords are typically going to be kind of your horizontal position followed by your vertical position, or depending on how you do it, it really kind of doesn't matter. In this case, what we want is we want center and then left. So what we're saying is that we want it centered vertically, but we want it all the way on the left-hand side of the element. All right, let's take a look at what that does to our page. So when we refresh, haha, so what do we still need to do? What we still need to do here is we need to also declare background repeat none. And what that will do is that will keep us from having that sort of ongoing onslaught of PDF icons. So, did I save it? I saved it. Come here, hit refresh. And that's because none doesn't work. It's no repeat. So just to show you that every now and again, any of us can sort of foul up. Ta-da! So there we go. So what we want to do is create a very similar set of rules for the Word class. And you could create a rule for all of the definition list items and have all of the stuff they have in common, and then have separate rules that address the individual images if you wanted to as well. There's actually a lot to be said for going that route because it allows you to keep the spacing kind of consistent, and it forces you to have the same size images in both cases. Okay, Word icon.png, background position center left, and background repeat no repeat. There we go. And you could of course apply some additional padding and such in order to shift that spacing a little bit and make it a little bit friendlier. Okay, so that is pretty much it. The one other thing to know is what's called background attachment, and this just has to do with what happens with the background. Does it stay put or does it scroll? As you can see, when we hit scroll, the background image moves with the scrolling of the page. So what I'm going to do is just add one more background property really quickly here. Background attachment. The default setting is scroll. Your other option is fixed, which is what I'm going to choose here. And let's see how that changes things. So you'll see that now as you scroll, that gradient kind of stays in place. And that can be really handy if you've got an image and you want it to continue to be visible no matter where a person is on a page. So those are all of the properties that you are likely to encounter that are going to be pretty cross-browser compliant and are going to work even on older browsers. I mean, you know, not like crazy old and not like Lynx and stuff like that, but certainly IE7 and IE8 are going to play nicely with all of these property value pairs. So go ahead, take a break, stretch your legs, do whatever it is you need to do. See you in a minute.